Hello and welcome back, friends, to Scripture Revisited. On today's episode, I have a very passionate topic that I've been waiting to talk about for a long time. And this topic actually starts off with a story. I'm sure that by the title of this episode, you can figure out what it will be about, but I would like to begin with an introductory story. I don't remember how old I was, maybe 7 years old, maybe 8 years old, but I was very young. And I remember I went to a camp one time, and now I was having a great time at this camp, but I didn't really know anyone. So I was just trying to figure out my way by sticking around people that looked like they knew what they were doing. And when night fell, we were all going somewhere. So naturally, I get up and, well, I start walking with everyone, but I don't really know where. I'm just going with the flow, I'm going where everyone else is going. And then we enter a cornfield. So I try to stick around the back. I'm hanging around like the caboose, and I still don't know anyone, but my sense of direction is on the crowd. I know where the crowd, well, I don't know where the crowd is going, but I know they're going somewhere. So I'm following them because hey, it looks like they know where they're going and I don't. And then at one point, I make a wrong turn because I stood around for a little too long, and I turn around and I don't see the crowd anywhere. I lost the crowd entirely in the cornfield. I lost my sense of direction because I was so reliant on the crowd to guide me that when I lost the crowd, I lost my direction. Now, eventually, at one point, one of the leaders was hanging around a couple 100 feet back and found me and then guided me to the destination. And we made it to the nighttime activity where we were just looking at fireworks. But the point is, I was very young and I was lost and I was afraid because I put all of my faith in the crowd. I was completely reliant on the crowd for my direction. And therefore, I would like to title this episode Following the Crowd. Following the Crowd. And it seems to be more applicable, more prevalent than ever before because we have this thing called trends where we have to follow what the latest trend is, what's going on, who's doing what, and why aren't we doing what those somebodies are doing. I want to read just one verse today, and we will keep revisiting it, but there's so much to unpack in this one verse. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 1. Therefore, be imitators of God as beloved children. Therefore, be imitators of God. We're not called to follow the crowd. None of us are called to do what the world is doing. We're called to evangelize to the world and their ways. I'm not called to follow the crowd. I'm called to follow Christ. And when we hear this call, don't follow the crowd, our natural reflex of a response is, well, I'm not. Lucas, don't follow the crowd. And before anyone can even finish blurting out that call to me, I intuitively think I'm not because I'm a Christian. I'm not following the crowd because I'm a Christian. And I would expand this calling a little bit more to take it from don't follow the crowd and turn it into don't follow the Christian crowd, follow Christ. And immediately we feel a little bit of discomfort because we think, whoa, whoa, don't follow the Christian crowd. Well, that doesn't sound right. That doesn't sound biblical. And we're completely ignoring the latter half of the call. Don't follow the Christian crowd, follow Christ. Because we think, well, I'm not following anyone other than Christ because I'm here. I'm in church. I'm amongst believers. And so is Judas. See, the thing is, proximity to Jesus has to be genuine, has to be proximity to Jesus, not just proximity to the crowd around Jesus. Christianity as a visual is a person and an arrow next to that person pointing to the cross. This direct relationship of a person, of a creation, and the creator. That's the visual, a person and an arrow pointing to the cross. That is Christianity. That is following Jesus Christ. But more often than not, Christianity in today's day and age does not have this direct relationship, but looks more like this: a person standing, and then an arrow next to him pointing to a crowd, because we're hanging around behind the crowd. And we can't even see what that crowd is pointing to. Because when we are in that maze as that young child, we can't see above, we can't see past or around. I had no idea where the crowd was going, but I was following them and I was putting my trust and faith in them. I had developed my entire sense of direction in that moment on the crowd because I had no idea where they were going, but I was assuming that it was going somewhere where it was necessary for the camp. We cannot assume that the people we are following, the crowd that we are following, will lead us to Jesus. Only Jesus will lead us to Jesus. Now, I'm not saying get rid of everyone around you. By no means am I saying get rid of the community around you. No, because the third illustration that we have is a Christian community. And this is a group of people that has a direct arrow pointing to the cross. I am all for Christian community. I am all for fellowship amongst believers, but we all have to ask ourselves a very convicting question. Am I a part of the crowd that is going to Jesus, or am I trying to be like the crowd? Am I trying to be like the crowd, or am I in a crowd that's trying to be like Jesus? Am I following the crowd and the crowd is following Jesus, or am I in the crowd that's following Jesus? I know it sounds confusing for some of us, but I know for others it's hitting right on the dot. Because a lot of us are copying other Christians rather than Christ. A lot of us are imitating other people instead of imitating God. Therefore, be imitators of God as beloved children. We we are copying Christians who are copying other Christians who are copying other Christians when we ought to be copying Christ. We say to ourselves, if I just look like, if I just talk like them, if I just behave like them, then I am saved like them. But how do I know if they're saved? Maybe some of us listening are not relating to this message because we think to ourselves, well, I have a wonderful community around me. We have a wonderful Christian community. We all exhort one another, encourage one another, motivate one another. We persevere together. When one of us is suffering, all of us are suffering. When one of us rejoices, all of us rejoice. We are this body, this church, and we are all moving together towards Christ. And that is beautiful. That is beautiful because where two or three are gathered, Jesus dwells among them. We are not called to live life on our own. This message is more for the people that are trying to fit in with the crowd rather than trying to fit in with God. I cannot stress this enough. I am not condemning crowds. I am not condemning communities. But seek to fit in with the Lord. And when seeking to fit in with the Lord, inevitably God will send us a community, a crowd with whom we can fellowship, with a crowd that we can build ourselves up in, that we can all serve Jesus Christ together. It's just there's danger. There's a big danger in following the crowd. Judas was following the crowd. Judas was amongst believers. He was closer to Jesus physically than any of us. He saw Jesus perform miracles and yet still had the audacity to say, "What can I get for him?" To the Pharisees speaking. He didn't even give them a price. He just said, "What can I get out of this? You know, I've wasted all of this time. I've wasted years of my life. Jesus' 3.5 year long ministry. I've wasted my time in it. What can I get out of it?" I saw a woman the other day and she took this expensive alabaster jar of perfume and she dumped it on his feet and was wiping his feet with her hair. And I just thought to myself, what a waste. And Jesus was this close to Jesus. Judas was so close to Jesus, and yet he was following the crowd. Because while the 11 disciples, their eyes were on Jesus, Judas's eyes, he couldn't see Jesus because he was behind the disciples. He was trying to be like the disciples rather than trying to be like Jesus. And when we follow the crowd, we can't see the destination because the crowd is blocking our view. So we try to fill in the blank. We just try to guess and assume what we ought to do. And the best that we can do is just guess. Well, if I look like them and I talk like them, I use that fancy theological literature and vocabulary like them. I act like them, behave like them. I start to dress like them. I read the Bible like they do, and I sing like they do. Therefore, I will be saved like they are. But then I'm hanging up all my faith on a person instead of Jesus. Judas looked like a disciple. He spent time around true disciples. He ate with the disciples, drank, cried, rejoiced. He prayed with the disciples, all with the mentality that I'll just do what they are. I'll just do what they're doing rather than doing what Jesus is doing. Judas walked with the disciples. The other 11, they knew their path. Jesus was their path. But when it was time to be alone, maybe at the end of the day, we had just spent an entire day with friends, with believers, with our good brothers and sisters in the faith, and then we get home alone. I cannot argue this enough that as uncomfortable as this truth is, how we are when we are alone, that is the real us. When I am by myself and no one is around, that's the real me. When we are by ourselves and no one sees us, that's the real you. No one to impress, no one to imitate. But yet, how many are there that even by themselves close the door behind them in their bedroom, get on their knees and pray and imitate God, trying to do what Jesus has called us to do, following the example that he set out for us? And no one will ever know that this guy or this young girl was praying in her room all alone, praying to Jesus, having this community, this relationship with him. How we are when we are alone, that is the real us. Judas looked like a disciple, but he was not one. He was around true disciples, and yet he never became a true disciple because he was following the crowd. It's just very important to not idolize any one pastor, any one preacher, any one evangelist, and then bring them up to this divine standard that whatever they say must be truth. even if it is heretical. Because the moral of the story is that people fall, people fail, people mess up. Because we have a fallen nature that though we are redeemed, we are not exempt from mistakes. We mess up. And if we hang up all of our faith on a crowd, on a group, on any one person other than Jesus Christ, they will let us down. We're called to follow Christ. And I would like to end off with this. We're not called to follow the crowd, we are called to follow Christ in a crowd, a part of the crowd that then becomes the church. And we can ask ourselves very practical questions. Who am I trying to be like? What influences my relationship with God? Why do I read? When do I read? Why am I reading at the time that I am reading? Why am I reading the translation that I am reading? Why am I reading this chapter or book in the Bible? Why am I reading it? What led to that decision? Was it because someone recommended it and I thought, well, I really want to be like this person? Or was it because someone recommended it and then I thought, I really want to be like Jesus? Thank you for this recommendation. I can't wait to read it and be more like you. Or thank you for this recommendation. You've really opened my eyes that Jesus is beautifully displayed in this chapter, and I am going to revisit it. Why do I talk the way I talk? Why do I adapt certain vocabulary terms from other people? Why do I speak the way I speak? Who am I trying to sound like? Why do I dress the way I dress? Who am I trying to look like? Therefore, be imitators of God as beloved children. The only person we're called to look like, to talk like, act like, behave like, to live like is Jesus Christ. And there are a lot of us that are trying to do that. And we fail, we fall, we mess up, we slip, we get hurt, but we get back up. And very often, the crowd that follows Christ with us helps us back up. But if we're behind the crowd, how would they help us out? Follow Jesus. Follow Jesus and stay well, my friends. My prayer for every one of us is that we do not try to copy Christians rather than copying God. We cannot hang up our faith on any one person other than Jesus Christ. Stay well, my brothers and sisters in the faith. Stay blessed, and Godspeed.